everybody, today we're going to be making the Forest Friends soft book project from Me Time Delivered, which is a Kimberbell company. Your kit comes with the printed instructions and the fabrics and the embellishments. You need to provide your own wash away stabilizer, wash away topping, threads, paper tape, and then you'll be needing some scissors. I've already prepped all of my fabrics. They're starched and pressed. I've got the felt cut. There's a piece of elastic you need to measure and cut, some shape form that does come in your kit, and there's also vinyl. I have everything labeled, and on my 18-inch design board I have my paper tape, and I usually use two pairs of scissors, the double curved applique scissors and the snips. I'll make sure all of this is linked below for you. I've pulled all my threads. I have them in my fabric wrapped rope bowl. I have a video on how to make one of these. I'll make sure that's linked below. As we work through the project, I'll hold up and show you all my threads. I'm working with Floriani, Glide, and Sim Thread brand threads. What I like to do is make a copy of this from the instructions, check off anything that I actually have, and then I'll go through and I'll do color matching. I use a Glide color card, or I look at the fabrics and see what matches best. A quick note, you can see here it has an indicator for bobbin thread color. I always leave my bobbin thread as white. My machine likes 90 weight bobbin thread. When we go to make our little animals, what that means is on the back of my animals, they're going to have white thread, but I'm okay with that. You can always use a Sharpie and color it in. I also don't have any invisible thread, so I looked through the project and saw the invisible thread was used for the Meadow Pockets tack down, and I've got a color PF370, and that matches the fabric used in that step. When I went through the instructions, I noticed that a lot of the felt was almost exactly the same size that you needed. So if it was slightly larger, I didn't cut it down. I just went with it. We're going to start with the soft book. It's done in 3 parts. We're going to stitch the front cover, then the pockets, and then the inside, and then we'll assemble the book. After that, we'll work on the animals. You're going to want to load some wash away stabilizer in your hoop. If you have a 6x10 hoop, you can use that. I don't. I have an 8x12 and an 8x8, so I'm using my 8x12 hoop today. I'll be using that throughout this project. Let's head over to the machine. I thought I'd show you my setup today. I'll be working on a baby lock meridian. The files are on USB. I've got my instructions here on this folding metal book stand. I'll link that below. I have my Kimberbell home sewn needle minder. This is great because it sticks to the metal book stand and you can move it as you're working and it holds your place for you, so you know exactly where you are on the instructions. Over here I've got all my threads, and then over here on a tray table I've got everything I need for my project. Let's go ahead and load our file for the front cover of the soft book. You want this file right here that says Forest Friends and it has a little tree on it. We'll go ahead and select that. I'm going to hit Set and Embroidery, and we're going to get started. You're going to want the color Rock Navy on your machine. This is the Floriani thread color I have picked out for that. We're going to stitch out the front cover placement line. You want to grab your front cover felt, make sure to cover those placement lines. I'm going to add a piece of tape to hold that in place, and then we're going to stitch out the corner basting tack down lines, and you're not going to trim the felt at this time. Next we're going to switch to the color Pearl, and we're going to stitch out the words Forest Friends. Next we're going to switch to the color Sandcastle, and we're going to stitch out the trunk fill. Switch to Clover, and we're going to stitch out the tree placement line. Grab your front cover tree fabric. You want to make sure you cover that placement line we just stitched out. And I would tape this all the way around. We've got felt on felt. It might slide a little bit while we're stitching the tack down and decorative fill. That's all going to stitch out as one step. So you don't want this moving. I'd say tape it down. Keep an eye on it. Once that's stitched out, you want to peel off your tape and then trim close to that outside tack down line. It's what they call a raw, R-A-W, edge applique, so there's not going to be any decorative stitching. This is it for this piece. We're over at the table. I've got my tree trimmed and I cut all the little jump threads in between. We want to get this out of our hoop. Once you've got that out of your hoop, it says to trim the stabilizer and the felt 1/8 of an inch from the corner basting lines on each side. It's a raw edge finish set aside. I've got a Creative Grids ruler here. It's called Itty Bitty Eighths Rectangle Extra Large. It's got the 1/8 inch marks on it. That's going to make it easier for me to trim. You can see 1/8 inch right there. I can line that up right along the stitch lines and go ahead and get this trimmed. I went to put my ruler down. This is really hard to see. If you flip it to the back, you've got white thread. You can see it's right here. It lines up with the whole rectangle, so it's almost easier to trim this from the back. You can line up the 1/8 of an inch right along that stitch line. If you don't have an 1/8 of an inch ruler, most rulers have a 1/4 inch mark. You can use that and then slide it over a little bit. I've got my 1/8 of an inch lined up right on that stitching line. It's a lot easier to see on the back. If you have trouble seeing it on the front, flip it to the back, and I'm going to trim all the way around. Note about doing all this trimming. You can wait and trim later. When I go to put the soft book together, I have a little bit of trouble lining it up with the thumbtacks, so you may want to set this aside, watch the rest of the video, and decide when you want to trim your piece. We're all trimmed. It says to go ahead and set this aside for now, so I'm not going to worry about the wash away stabilizer. We'll take care of that later. Load another piece of wash away into your hoop, and we're going to go on to part 2, which is stitching the pockets. Your first step is to starch and press the meadow and the lake fabrics. If you haven't done that already, do that. And then we're going to take our hoop over to the machine. We're going to load the soft book pockets file. You want to put the color Aloe on your machine, and we're going to stitch out the meadow placement line. You want to grab your meadow fabric. We're going to place it right side up, covering that placement line, and then we're going to tack it down. I went ahead and added a piece of tape there at the top. We're going to stitch the tack down. We want to trim everything that's outside of the tack down line. And the next step we're going to do, it does say to match your bobbin thread to your top thread. So if you want to do that, get some of this aloe color on a bobbin. I mentioned at the beginning I'm going to be working with my 90 weight white thread throughout. I've got that trimmed, and I just realized I forgot to show my needles. I keep forgetting to do that. Right now on my machine I have a Schmetz Super Non-Stick 8012 needle. I think a regular 7511 embroidery needle will be fine for this. This just happens to be on my machine right now. It's a fairly new needle, so I'm not going to change it. Change your bobbin thread if you want to do that so it matches your top thread, and we're going to stitch out the meadow satin outlines. If you changed your bobbin thread to match, switch it back to a neutral color, and then we're going to switch to the color Chill and stitch out the lake placement line. Grab your lake fabric. It says to place it right side up. It's a solid. It looks the same on both sides. Make sure you cover that placement line. I'm going to add a little piece of tape. We're going to stitch the tack down, and then we'll trim. Once you've got that trimmed, we're going to stitch out the lake decorative satin outlines. Keep the color Chill on your machine. We're going to stitch out the lake pocket placement line. Grab the vinyl, and you want to cover those lines, and we're going to tape it in place. Normally when I work with clear vinyl, I take a little bit of extra time to clean it off with an eyeglass cleaning cloth, make sure there's no fingerprints, dog hair, anything like that. But we're using wash away stabilizer, and we're going to be washing everything away and cleaning it anyway. So go ahead and get that taped down, and then we're going to stitch the lake pocket tack down line. Once you've got that tacked down, go ahead and remove the tape, and then we're going to stitch out the trimming guide. Once those lines have stitched, you can trim away the vinyl that's outside of the tack down. Once you've got that trimmed, we're going to head over to the table. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of my hoop. It's out of the hoop. The next step tells us to trim the stabilizer 1/8 inch away from the outer stitch lines. Don't get hung up on measuring 1/8 of an inch, because as soon as we trim it, we're going to be cutting the pieces apart, and then we're going to dissolve the water-soluble stabilizer. The next step is to cut the pocket pieces apart on the trimming guides from step 17. That's the line right here. I'm going to show you my trimming. See the stitching here? No stitching. This happens every time I try to trim on a line. If this happens to you, don't worry about it. Your project will be fine. The stitching is here on one side and it's not on this side. The next thing it says to do is to use a wet cotton swab, dissolve the remaining stabilizer from the edges of the fabric pocket, and to rinse the vinyl pockets in cool water to dissolve the remaining stabilizer. It doesn't say we have to put this in water and dissolve all of this. I've got some water in here, and I actually prefer to use a sponge brush for this. You can buy these in craft stores. They're pretty cheap. I think it works a little bit better. I can cover a larger area. You just wet it, and it will dissolve. Sometimes you have to wait, let it sit for a minute, let it get nice and wet, and it'll dissolve faster if you cut it more like 1/8 of an inch. I've got about 1/4 of an inch stabilizer here, but you want to go all the way around and get rid of it. And then what you can do is feel it, and if it feels sticky, you didn't get all of it. So then you'll go around again and just make sure you've dissolved everything around the edges. I ended up getting these pretty wet, and some of the thread pulled, so watch for that. You can see I've got a little bit of shredding here on the fabric. I don't think it's going to matter. We're going to be putting this into the soft book, and it's starting to dissolve on the back. It's really sticky. I think what I'm going to do is actually dissolve everything, all of this and all of this. I'm going to do that in a bowl because it gets sticky. I don't want this washing down the drain and gumming up the pipes, so I get a bowl and I fill it full of cool water, and you just kind of let it sit about 15-20 seconds, and then you can rub it away before you wet it. You can cut some of this away if you like, just be careful, and then it's less that you have to dissolve. You can see I've got most of that cut away. I'm going to do the same with my vinyl before I take this to soak and dissolve. Go ahead and get your pieces all cleaned up, and we'll go on to the next step. We're on part 3, stitching the inside and assembling the book. Load your hoop again with wash away stabilizer, and let's head over to the machine. We are on part 3. We're going to stitch the inside and assemble the soft book. We need to bring up our file. It's the one with the mountains and the trees on it. That one right there. And we're going to start with the color Rock Navy, so get that on your machine. The first thing we're going to stitch out is the book spine placement line. You want to grab the shape form that came in your kit. Make sure to cover that placement line, tape it, and stitch the tack down. I would recommend sitting here and watching it. You can remove your tape, and then you need to trim everything that's outside of the tack down lines. I actually trimmed the stitching in a couple of places. It's going to be fine. I'm not worried about it. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the elastic placement line. We want to grab our elastic. Make sure you measure it. They give you more than you need in the kit. We're going to fold it in half, raw edges together, creating a loop. Place the loop so the raw edges extend 1/4 inch past the placement line with the loop at the top of the hoop. So you've got your placement line up here that you just stitched. There's the placement line. You can get a ruler and measure. I'm just going to eyeball it today. I don't feel like getting up. About 1/4 inch past. That's easily 1/4 inch past. Make sure you're covering that line. Make sure I center it. And we want to add some tape to it right there. And we're going to stitch a tack down. I'm actually going to add a little tiny bit of tape right here at the end to hold this down. And I'm going to sit here and watch my machine and keep my hand on the start and stop button in case it gets caught, because this is sticking up quite a bit. That went really well. No issues with that. Go ahead and remove the tape. And then the next thing we're going to stitch is the inside cover placement line. Something that I think I'm going to do, I don't see it in the instructions, but my little tape loop is kind of sticking up. I'm going to slide this toward me and push it down and just tape it to the top of my hoop to make sure it doesn't accidentally flip up. I added 3 pieces of tape just in case. We're going to slide this on and we're going to stitch the inside cover placement line. Grab your inside cover felt, cover the placement line, tape it in place. We're going to stitch a tack down, but we're not going to trim it right now. So you just want to get your tape on there and tack it down, and you don't have to trim. My tape is way outside of the tack down line. I'm just going to leave it for now. We're going to grab the color Mercury, and we're going to stitch out the placement lines for our sky fabric. Grab the sky felt, cover those placement lines. We're going to tape it in place, stitch the tack down, and then trim. And there is a decorative outline on this. Next, we're going to switch to the color sepia, and we're going to stitch out the placement lines for Mountain 1. Grab your Mountain 1 felt, cover the placement lines, tack it down, and trim. Once that's trimmed, you can stitch the decorative outline. Next, we're going to switch to Aloe and stitch out the Mountain 2 placement lines. You want to place your Mountain 2 felt, cover your placement lines, and I'm going to tape it here at the top. I already have 1 piece of tape there, and at the bottom. The tape is really sticky on the felt. I wouldn't want to tape it here because this is part of the book. You don't want to accidentally be pulling up the felt that's going to be part of the book. Once you've got it taped, go ahead and stitch the tack down, and then we're going to trim. Once you've got that trimmed, you're going to switch to Clover and stitch out the Mountain 2 details. Next, we're going to switch to Sandcastle and stitch out the tree trunk fill and detail. Switch to Clover and stitch out the tree placement lines. Once the tree placement lines have stitched out, we're going to place our tree fabric. You want to look at page 10, step 31. There's a nice picture here showing us how to lay out our trees. There's tree 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you cut your fabrics, you've got tree 1 and 4, and 2 and 3. So the little ones, 2 and 3, go in the middle, and 1 and 4 go on the outside. So go ahead and place those and tape them in place. Here's how I taped mine. For the outside trees, I used a new piece of tape. I pressed it down. I'm not worried about it pulling out any of the felt because eventually we're going to be trimming right about there. For the inside too, this piece of tape I've already used a couple times so it's not super sticky, and I just kind of lightly pressed it to make sure it's going to stay in place. I am going to sit here and watch this as it stitches out. We're going to stitch the tack down and the decorative fill stitching, and once that's done, you can take your tape off and trim it. There's not going to be any more stitching outside of the trees. It's a raw edge applique finish. That takes a bit of time. Highly recommend snips for that. They can get into these tiny little places and get all the little fuzzies going kind of up and down and up and down. Grab your snips to trim those trees. Next, we want to switch to the color Aloe, and we're going to stitch the meadow pocket placement lines and tick marks. Table, you want to grab your pieces that we stitched in the last step. We're going to be placing these covering the tick marks so that the top edges just cover those tick marks. So you've got 2 tick marks right there and 2 tick marks right here. It says the trunk should be visible just above the meadow pockets and then to tape into place. I'm covering the tick marks. I can see the trunks. Don't worry if these aren't matching up exactly. We're going to be stitching some lines looks like about here and here, and trimming away any extra, and there's going to be a decorative outline. So if they don't match exactly, that's fine, don't worry about it. It shows the tape for this part on the bottom, which makes sense because we don't want to put the tape here. We'll pull up the felt. So we'll go ahead and tape these across the bottom, and I'm double checking, making sure I'm covering that tick line and that one, and then I'm going to put a piece of tape on the outside as well. It's not going to hurt to have extra tape on the outside. And then we'll get our tape for this other piece. Go ahead and tape that in place. And then we're going to add a piece on the outside. Next, you want to grab your wash away topping. If you've never used this before, it's kind of like saran wrap. It helps keep the stitches from sinking down into the felt. It shows covering this whole section right here, so we're going to want to cut a piece that's going to cover that part of the project. I've got that covered. It shows taping it into place, and it shows a piece of tape right here. I am not putting a piece of tape across that part of the project. It's going to pull up the felt. I'm going to put some tape here at the bottom and at the sides. Once you've got that taped into place, we're ready to go back over to the machine. Don't worry if it's got wrinkles or folds or anything. Just kind of smooth it out a little bit and tape it. That's all going to come off. For the next step, we're going to stitch the tack down. It says to use invisible thread. I don't have invisible thread. I'm going to use this color. This is the color I picked for the color Chill. It matches the fabric really well. In the picture for that step, it shows the tack down only stitching this part, and you can see it actually went up onto the green, but we're going to be stitching a satin outline over that. I'm hoping that'll cover the blue. We'll find out. You're going to want to pull this off your machine, take off the tape, and then you're going to be removing all of that wash away topping. If you pull your tape off carefully, you can trim this part here. That's a nice big piece, and keep that for another project. And then you'll have another square right here. Once you've got your tape and the topping removed, you needed to trim away the excess. You can see I've already done that. For the parts that have satin stitching and decorative stitching, when I was trimming right on the edges, I used older scissors. I did not use my good scissors for that. That was a lot to cut through. We're going to cover this again with wash away topping. We want to make sure everything's covered, and I'm going to tape it the same way. I'm going to tape it on the sides and across the bottom. I'm going to switch to the color Aloe, and we're going to stitch out the meadow decorative outlines. Next, we're going to switch to Chill and stitch out the lake pocket placement lines. Now we're going to remove the tape, tear away the topping. Let's look at this stitching right here and see if you can see the blue thread underneath the green decorative stitching. I don't think you can. I don't see it, although sometimes when I go into editing and I have it on the big monitor, I can see it. It looks like there might be a little bit of blue through there. Either way, it's fine. I'm not worried about it. Go ahead and take your tape off and remove the topping. Next, you want to grab your lake pockets. Mine have water spots all over them because I cleaned everything and got that wash away topping off, so you might need to take a few minutes to clean it. We need to place these so that the topped curved edges line up with the curved edges that are stitched out. Kind of like that. That's kind of a shame. These are really cool looking curved edges. We're covering them up. So you don't want it, off center. It says to line it up so they're exactly covering that decorative outline. And then tape it into place. So here's the first one, and then we'll go ahead and put the second one down, lining it up, and then we'll tape that into place. It's kind of hard to tape into place because that lake decorative outline pops up and it makes your vinyl slide around a bit. So I'd say just do the best you can. It tells us to cover these with wash away topping. I'm going to look at my pieces. I'm wondering if I can lay some pieces down next to each other rather than cutting a bunch of new pieces. I want to make sure that I tape that in place since I'm using a couple of separate pieces. That looks pretty good. I added a couple more small pieces of tape. I'm just going to sit here and watch this step. Remove the tape, remove the wash away topping, and then trim our vinyl. And then we're covering it again with wash away topping. Here's what that looks like after the vinyl is trimmed. I'm going to take this back over to the table, put a new piece of wash away over it, and then come back and we'll stitch out the decorative outline. The decorative outline is all stitched out. You don't pull away the topping at this time. You want to grab your thumbtacks. I have my thumbtacks this time. I've got 4 thumbtacks. It says to place them exactly in each corner of the inside cover tack down line stitched in direction step 13. Here's direction step 13. So it's the outside line. I will tell you it's a little difficult to see. It's not the corner where you can see all the nice colored felt. It's actually outside of that. I don't even know how I'm going to see it on that part. We'll do the upper two first. So right here in the corner, and then it says to put a piece of tape over it to hold it in place. I don't think it's going to fall out. We'll find out. I'm going to get them all placed first. I can see the corner there. Get that in place. I can't see it here because of the wash away. You may have the same problem. I'm just going to peel that back. Go ahead and get that placed. And then you can put that right back over it. And then the other corner, I'm going to do the same thing. Peel it back, try and find it, and then just put it back over. There we go. And then we're going to flip this over to the other side. I will add a little bit of tape to these because when I set it down, they poke up. I've got a little bit of tape just on the outside. Again, I didn't want to put tape on this and risk pulling up the felt. Let's flip it over and you should be able to see all 4 of your thumbtacks. You're going to need to put something underneath this to support it because we're going to press on the front cover, and if we push, it's going to push in the hoops. So we need to get like a folded towel or a pressing mat or something to put underneath that. I put a bath towel underneath it, one of those hand towels. That seems to be holding that into place. It tells us to align the basting line corners of the front cover with the thumbtacks shown in red. So if you're on number 51, page 11, you'll see that there's a little red dot. Be sure the front cover is the same orientation, and then we're going to push it onto the thumbtacks and press into place. The way I have this right now is upside down. There's the top of the book. You can see the mountains here. Here's the lakes. The trees are pointing that way. Look at your trees. Mine are pointing that way. This tree pointing that way. And we want to match up the corners. It's going to be a little bit of a tight squeeze, and I'm probably going to have to get this over to the window. I'm having a lot of trouble seeing the navy thread on the navy fabric. It's such a good match. I'm going to tell you what's going on, and then you can make your own decision on what to do with this. Every time I place this down, so if I place this here, I'm on the thumbtack, and we get it in place. Now I have to do the next one. It pulls off the other thumbtack. I literally cannot place more than one thumbtack at a time. I think what I'm going to actually do is take off the thumbtacks and just line it up to the best of my ability and tape it into place. I can look at the stitch lines on the back and line it up. Trees are pointing up, tree is pointing up. And I'm going to look at the stitch lines, kind of fold it like this, and make sure the stitch lines are matching. Match, 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 match. That looks good. I'm going to grab a piece of tape and tape the corner, and then I'm going to do the same thing here as I'm folding it down, making sure my stitch lines are matching. That looks good. And then I'll do the other 2 corners, and then I'm going to have to add more tape. It shows adding tape all along the side. Once you've got that taped, you're going to turn your hoop to the front, pull out your thumbtacks, which I already did. We're going to go over to the machine, and it tells you to match your bobbin thread to the top thread. I'm not going to do that. So my book is going to have a white outline because I'm going to have bobbin thread showing on this side. I'm going to want to switch to the rock navy, and if you're matching your bobbin thread to your top thread, put the rock navy on your bobbin. We're going to stitch out the cover and spine tack down lines, and that's the last step on the embroidery machine. We're all done at the machine for this. You probably saw me starting and stopping the machine. I was also raising and lowering the presser foot, kind of adjusting this wash away because I didn't have any tape here. Always start and stop your machine if you've got your hands anywhere near your presser foot, because this doesn't know that you have hands here. It'll stitch over your fingers. It doesn't care. Let's take this over to the table. If you changed your bobbin thread to match, make sure you change it back to the regular color. We want to remove all the tape and all the wash away topping. I managed to catch a little bit of tape in this stitching. This is really hard to pick out. Let's go ahead and get it out of our hoop. You want to make sure that you do not cut your elastic because that's going to go around it and hold the little book together. We're going to cut through all the layers 1/8 of an inch from the outer stitch line. So looking at the outer stitch line, it's in the navy. It's a little difficult to see again, but you know what? I didn't change my bobbin thread, so I can use this. I have white, and I'll be honest with you, I think it looks fine. It looks like the book has a nice little outline detail to it. I don't see any problem with having the white on this. Let's go ahead and get this trimmed. Looking at this piece, I'm trying to think of the best way to trim this. Let's get rid of this stabilizer and get that out of the way. It's wash away. We're going to get rid of the fuzzies anyway. I'm actually going to get a nice pair of scissors. These are Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're fairly sharp, and I'm just going to trim carefully. Let's have a look. That looks pretty good. We're going to dissolve the wash away stabilizer just like before. You can use Q-tip or a sponge brush or wet the whole thing. Get rid of that stabilizer. I'm going to use my sponge brush. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and then we're going to make all of our little animals. We're on the second part of our project. We're going to make all the little animals. Go ahead and load some wash away stabilizer in your hoop. You can use a 6x10 hoop for this. I'm using my 8x12. As we work through this, you want to watch for the match the bobbin thread to the top thread. I will call that out, but I'm not going to do that. Let's go ahead and load our file. It's going to be the one with all the little animals. They're all on the same file. Going to start with the bear, and we'll be working top down. The first thread color you're going to need is cocoa. This is the color that I've selected for cocoa. I'm going to put that on my machine, and we're going to stitch out the bear placement line. You have 2 pieces of felt for your bear. One is going to be for the front and one's for the back. So grab 1 piece of bear felt. We're going to add a piece of tape. Once you've got that taped, we're going to stitch the bear tack down line, and it says don't trim. And then the next step is the bear shading and fur details. They're both done in the color cocoa. I'm going to go ahead and run those 2 steps together. We're going to change to the color hickory. This is the thread color that I've pulled for that. We're going to stitch out the eyes and the nose details. Next, we're going to pull our hoop off the machine, and we need to get our next piece of bear felt. You want to flip your hoop to the back and make sure that you cover your stitch lines. So put it just like that. You can match it up with the other piece of felt, and then we're going to tape that in place. The instructions show a piece of tape here and here. We're going to turn it to the front, put it back on our machine, and we want to switch to the color Sandcastle. If you're going to match your bobbin thread to your top thread, you want to do that. I'm leaving my bobbin thread. This is the color I have for Sandcastle. I'm going to put that on the machine, and then we're going to stitch out the bear inner outline. That's all stitched. I'm thinking the color I have for Sandcastle is probably lighter than the real Sandcastle. I do try to color match. When I look at this, I'm thinking you could have probably just used cocoa for it. Just personal preference. When you look at it, if you think the thread you have might be too light, you can use another thread. Let's flip it to the back. I want to see what the back looks like. Because remember, mine is stitched in white. So it has the white bobbin thread. Somewhere in this house we have a brown Sharpie. I'm not sure where it is though. So if you don't switch out your bobbin thread, you can always color the threads with a Sharpie or any other kind of permanent marker. It says to pull off our tape on the back. Let's do that, and then we're going to flip to the front, and we have to trim off a little corner. If you changed your bobbin thread to match, go ahead and switch it back. Now in the instructions, it shows trimming on the front right here. We're not going to trim around the bear. We need to get this corner out of the way because the next animal is the moose, and we don't want this to be in the way, so you're going to trim that off, and then you'll go to the back and trim off a little piece on the back side. Should look like this. I'm going to put my hoop back on the machine. We need to change our thread to the color Bordeaux, and we're going to stitch out the moose placement line. Here's the moose felt. This is the color that I had matched for Bordeaux. It's kind of a deep purple. I don't like that. I don't think that's going to look good at all. I'm going to go ahead and use cocoa instead of Bordeaux. I've got my dark brown thread on the machine. I'm going to stitch out the moose placement line. We're going to do the same thing we did with the bear. We want to place our moose fabric. Make sure we cover those lines. Then we're going to stitch the tack down. You do not trim at this time. And stitch the shading and fur details. I'll go ahead and run those 2 steps together. I'm checking to make sure that none of my bear felt is overlapping with this stitching. It's not, so I'm good there. Switch to hickory, and we're going to stitch out the eye. Next is burnt orange, and we're going to stitch out the antler fill 1, and then after that we're going to switch to medallion. Here's the color I have for medallion, and we're going to stitch out the antler fill 2. I'll go ahead and run both of those together. We've got to get our piece of the moose for the back, flip it over, and we're going to cover the back just like we did for the bear. All taped. We're going to put this back on our machine. If you're matching your bobbin thread to your top thread, you want to go ahead and put some medallion thread on a bobbin. That's the thread we just used right here. We're going to use it again for the next step and stitch out the antlers outline. Going to switch to cocoa. Again, it says to match your bobbin thread to your top thread, and we're going to stitch out the moose inner outline. The moose is done. Change your bobbin thread back to a regular color if you've switched it to match. You're going to take the tape off the front and the back, and we're going to want to trim here and then here under the feet. We're making room for the badger, which is going to go over here, and the fox, which is going to be stitched out down here. Got that trimmed here and here. I'm going to put this back on my machine. Make sure you've got your regular bobbin thread on there, and you want to go ahead and get the color pearl ready. We're going to stitch the badger placement line. I actually do have the color pearl. Grab a piece of the felt for the badger. Make sure you cover the placement lines. Add your tape. We're going to stitch the tack down line and then the stripes and fur details, and that's all stitched out in the color pearl. Going to switch to the color Starlight, and we're going to stitch out the shadows, fills, and then after that the eyes and nose detail with the color Hickory. I'm going to go ahead and run those 2 steps together. Once that's all stitched, flip your hoop to the back. Going to put your badger back felt there. Go ahead and tape it. It shows it again, a piece of tape here and here. And we're going to be switching to the color nickel. If you're matching your bobbin thread, you need to put some of this thread on your bobbin. I've got the back felt taped into place, nickel on my machine. If you're matching your bobbin thread, make sure you've got nickel in the bobbin. And we're going to stitch out the badger inner outline. If you changed your bobbin thread, change it back. I'm going to go ahead and pull off this tape. We don't have to trim anything away from this badger felt. We're going to start on the fox. You want to use the burnt orange color thread. Put that on your machine, and this is made the same way, so I'm going to run some of these duplicate steps together. We're going to stitch the placement line, set down the felt, tape it, stitch the tack down, and then stitch the fox shading fills. It's all done in this burnt orange. I'm going to go ahead and run all that together since we've already done 3 of the animals. It's done the same way. The next color is pearl, and we're going to stitch out the fox fur fills and then hickory for the eyes, nose, and legs fills. Once that part has stitched, same thing as before, flip it to the back, tape down the next piece of felt, and then you're going to want to match your bobbin thread to your top thread if you're doing that, and we're going to stitch out the fox inner outline with the color medallion. The fox is all done. We do need to trim away a little bit from the corner for the fox, so do that on the front and on the back. And then you're going to want to get the color pearl on your machine and make sure you've got your regular bobbin thread on. The next thing we're going to stitch is the fish placement line. Once you've stitched out the placement line for the fish, grab the fish felt. You want to cover the fish placement line, stitch the tack down, then stitch out the fish face fill. Try saying that fast. It's not going to happen. Let's go ahead and get that stitched out. Next, we're going to switch to Cocoa. We're going to stitch out the eye, the fins, and the mouth details. Next, we're going to switch to Pearl. We're going to stitch out the tail details, and then you're going to switch to Chill and stitch out the gills and scales details. Grab your fish fabric, take your hoop off, tape it to the back like we've been doing, and the last color we're going to use is Sandcastle. It says to match your bobbin thread to your top thread and stitch the fish inner outline. Everything is stitched out. You want to remove all of your tape, and then if you've got your instructions, go to page 18. Got some good pictures here. And actually a quick reminder, change your bobbin thread back if you've been matching your bobbin thread. You can take everything out of the hoop, and we're going to trim the Forest Friends exactly on the outer stitch lines. You can see the outer stitch lines here. Let's look at our animals. Each animal has an outer and an inner stitch line. On the bear, it's the darker line, so the outer line. The moose, the outside line. Here's your fox, the outside line. And the badger, it's the lighter colored line. And the fish, that outside line. I'm going to go ahead and do all of that off camera. These are some intricate little curves and cuts, and that's going to be really hard to do with my hands underneath the tripod. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the hoop, trim everything, remove the stabilizer around the edges, set it all out to dry. Then when everything's dry, I'll film the last sequence and you'll get to see what it looks like. It's the next day, everything is dry. I had to wet the whole thing, and I'll show you why. But I also want to show you when you wet it, it does get pretty stiff. You can bend it. And you are going to want to bend it along. See that? It's pretty stiff, but you do want to bend it right here. And as it gets used and handled, it's going to get soft. No worries about that. I just wanted to show that. And then I'm going to bend it here. So right where the stitching is, where the spine is, now it's ready to go. I had tape in here, and I still have some tape in here. I had trouble picking it out. I was trying to get it with tweezers, and it started to pull the stitching. So all I did was I trimmed out what I could, and then I just kind of, squished it all into the stitching. When you're putting this together, the step where everything is in the hoop and you've got to tape this down, just tape right at the very edge. Try not to run over your tape. Let's flip it over and have a look at the inside. It came out great. I probably need to lint roll it a little bit. Why did I have to wet the whole thing? Because the first time when I went around and I used a sponge brush just to get rid of the stabilizer, this part of the blue got wet, and when it dried, it left a stain. So I just ended up wetting the whole entire thing, laying it outside on a towel and letting it dry. It came out great. So if you need to wet the whole thing. Definitely do that if you end up with a stain. Let's check it with the elastic. It looks like everything should fit. Everything does fit. Let's look at our animals. Here's all the little animals. I had to get them wet too. If you remember, I did not match my bobbin thread. When you flip it to the back, I just don't think that's a big deal. They're all like that on the back with the white thread. I went ahead and trimmed everything. I think if you really want to make this stand out, and you have a lot of time on your hands, I would stitch the placement line, place the front, flip your hoop over to the back, and place the back felt And then every time you changed a color on the front, you would change it to match the bobbin thread, because then what would happen is you would get a mirror image of the animal on the back. But as far as changing your bobbin thread to match that final outline, these are blank on the back when you make them per the instructions, so it really doesn't matter. Let's get a good look at all the animals. We've got our bear, very cute, moose, got a fox, the badger, and the fish. Let's put all our animals inside the soft book. The moose has to be in the mountains. That makes the most sense. Although I guess he could be in the water if he wants to wet his feet and cool off. Let's put the bear down here. The bear's eyeing the fish. There's the fish. The badger. Although if I slide him in there, you can barely see him, but that's okay. There's the badger. And the fox. And the fox is having a spa day. She's getting a pedicure. Let's put her in there. She's Foxy Lady. There you go. All the animals fit inside. You can close up your soft book. Use the elastic. Put it around the outside and everything stays together. Great little thing to have in the car. It doesn't take up a lot of space. I think if you're traveling, this is a good thing to put in the kids' bags. Help keep them busy. At least I hope so. This would have entertained me as a kid, but we didn't have cell phones when I was a kid. Thank you so much for making the Forest Friends soft book with me. Let me know if you make this project, how it turned out. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them for me below the video. The product link will be below the video as well. I do have a Facebook group that is also linked below. You can share pictures, talk about your projects. It's a nice group of people. You have to answer one security question that helps keep out the spammers and the bots. Coming up, I'm waiting for my fabric kit. I'm going to be working on the Sippin' on Sunshine quilt. Beautiful. Isn't that pretty? This is going to be perfect for the summer. I'm going to go ahead and work with the fabrics as pictured. As soon as the fabric kit gets here, I'll do a video and I'll go through the fabrics and the embellishment kit, show you everything that's included. We'll also be starting on the May home sewn mini quilt soon. I'll do 2 videos for this like I did for April. I'll do a video where I pull the fabric and another video where I put the quilt together. And also coming to the channel, but not here yet, is the next Hoop Studio. I'll do an unboxing as soon as my kit arrives. Thank you again for joining me for Forest Friends. I'll see you next time.